Hey there, lovely Shedsters. Welcome to this humble house of God. Why not? At the bottom of the garden, the Holy Shed, where you are very, very welcome. Welcome to week 103, yo yes. Next week will be week 104, our second birthday. More of that in a little while. Sufficient to say, I have my birthday t-shirt. Again, I'll tell you about that later. But it's also the first Sunday in Lent. And I hope that you all got thoroughly ashed on Wednesday. I said ashed, by the way. Uh, I know it's a weird old thing, isn't it? Having someone make the sign of the cross in ash on your forehead and tell you that you're going to die. But actually, I always love doing it. You know, I've said those words. Remember, you are dust. To dust you shall return, hundreds and hundreds of times over so many people. And to me, it isn't morbid, it isn't gloomy. We remember and we're reminded of our mortality in order to remind ourselves to live, to live each moment as fully as we can, because life is precious. In a wonderful poem, Liesl Müller wrote, "What exists, exists so that it can be lost and become precious. What exists, exists so that it can be lost and become precious." In other words, it is our very mortality. It is the fact that our lives will come to an end that makes every moment precious and important. So anyway, we'll come back to Lent in a mo. But first, we can't possibly proceed any further in the Holy Shed today without acknowledging the utterly awful and diabolical backdrop to everything that's going on to our whole lives right now. The utterly insane and brutal onslaught by Vladimir Putin on Ukraine. And I say Vladimir Putin is doing the onslaught because he most certainly does not have the backing or support of millions of people in Russia. And I hate to just bunch them all together and say Russia is doing this. Maybe you know people in Ukraine, or you know people who know them, or relatives. One lovely Shedster has written me this week about family members there and the awful anxiety that's felt by everybody for these dear folk. Or maybe, like me, you don't know anybody in the Ukraine, but your heart bleeds for them all the same every day as we see these terrible news reports on the TV or hear them on the radio. There are no words to express what we feel at this time. There are no prayers that we can put together, but we can light a candle, and that's what we're going to do right now. So if you have a candle handy, then I invite you to light it with me now. And music also is a great thing that can help us to say things much better than stringing words together. So I'm going to play a song which, as we light our candles, that I used in Soul Space during the week. It's the music of the Ukrainian composer Mykola Lysenko, and it's called Prayer for Ukraine, and it was composed around the time in the 19th century when, ironically, the Imperial Russian government suppressed the use of the Ukrainian language. So it's been going back a long time, hasn't it? And the song is an incantation for divine protection, which just about breaks my heart. I love Eastern Orthodox music anyway, but this music against this background, let's just light our candles, look at some lovely images of Ukraine and listen to this music. Haunting images, haunting music. And as I say, I played that video at Soul Space this last week, a Soul Space which I curated for St Ethelburgers. And we called it Beauty from Ashes, which is why I've used that title for the Holy Shed today. And you know, the story of St Ethelburgers is itself a story of beauty from ashes. Because way back on a sunny Saturday in May in 1993, the IRA parked a truckload of explosives in Bishopsgate in the city area of London. Their target was all those high-rise buildings which, you know, signified the financial heart and power of London. But sadly, the church, St Ethelburgers, took a direct hit, destroying 70% of the building, a defunct 12th century church. A few years later, Richard Charters, the Bishop of London, stood in the crater of the bomb and prayed and had a vision to reconstruct the church, no longer as a church, but as a centre for peace and reconciliation. I was working for him at the time as his chaplain for the environment, and I felt so inspired by this man and by the vision that he had for this place, a redemptive vision. I mean, ironically, the IRA were the midwives here. They rebirthed the dead church to become a hive of beautiful, life-affirming activity, which I now have the privilege of modestly supporting as their chaplain. St Ethelburgers, you know, really was born out of a combination of violence and vision, beauty and ashes. And in commemoration of 9/11, another great tragedy in our world, an Islamic architect was commissioned to create a Bedouin tent at the rear of the building. And as you can see from these pictures, it's a very beautiful space. It's this lovely round structure covered in goat skin, which just, you know, invites you to come in, take your shoes off and be in this holy place. It has 8 stained glass windows, some of which you can see, each of which says peace in different languages. And then there's this seating around the outside, and I've led services in there and been at meetings, and it's one of the most precious places on earth to me. It is literally a vision of beauty out of ashes. And while preparing Soul Space this last week, I came across this picture which I wanted to use. It's a picture of a beautiful bird, a crimson rosella actually, which is perched on a scorched ashen branch after an Australian fire. So I contacted the photographer, who I didn't know, Carolyn Hyde, to ask her permission to use it, which she freely granted. And when she replied, she wrote these words. She said, "I thought you may be interested in the backstory of this photo. We live in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, and we had been going through a very prolonged bushfire event which had burned large swathes of the native vegetation that surrounds our house. After the fires had been extinguished and it was safe to venture back to one of our favourite walks near Govert's Leap, my husband Neil and I were talking about the resilience of our native plants and the birds and the animals that had survived the inferno. Suddenly my husband saw the rosella sitting on a charred branch of a tea tree, so I quickly focused my camera on it before it flew away. Many people," she says, "who've seen this photo have been moved by the imagery of resilience, and despite the devastation caused by the fires, life and beauty can persevere through the ashes." It's a wonderful picture, isn't it? And you know, I love seeing into the eye of nature, and I adore the way this bird is looking back at us. I think our world feels somewhat ashen today, and maybe you are living with your own ashes of loss or disappointment. So take inspiration from this gorgeous little bird. Now, I'm not sure why tradition dictates that there can't be any flowers in church in Lent. Well, I understand the symbolism of it, but it just seems a little bit perverse, really, doesn't it? That up here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's springtime, when everything is just coming alive. And so the church has got no flowers outside. God doesn't seem to have got the message. He's not on message. He has millions of them just bursting up all over the place. And that picture, of the rosella and the ashen tree captures my vision of Lent as a composite of light and dark, of ashes and life, of greyness and colour. So here we are. This is Lent, a tradition that stretches back to the early centuries of the church, where it was a period of fasting in preparation for Easter. Originally, it lasted no longer than 2 or 3 days. It wasn't until the 4th century that it was extended to 40 days to mirror the period of Jesus fasting and being tempted in the wilderness at the start of his ministry. The word Lent is actually from an Anglo-Saxon term meaning lengthen, referring, of course, to the lengthening days of spring. And for lots of people, religious or not, Lent serves as a kind of spring detox, really. We spring clean traditionally our homes at this time, and so it's often seen as a sort of a detox for the body and soul, which is no bad thing. I mean, we all know how easy it is to go a bit mad on all the comfort stuff in the winter months when it's dark and cold. And goodness knows, I mean, let alone winter, we've needed some comfort for about the last 2 years during COVID. And now we're emerging from that, and here we are again with news broadcasts every day that most of us can barely bear to watch, which is why many people tell me that they can't face giving things up for Lent this year. And I completely get that. So let me say a couple of things about Lent which may help. Firstly, Lent, I think, should never, ever get caught up in that horrible body despising or body degrading stuff that characterizes some aspects of so-called Christian spirituality and theology, which is based on a completely false dualism or split between the physical and the spiritual domains. The body-spirit split, which also mirrors a similar split between sacred and secular, goes, as I say, way back in Christian tradition, but it originates actually in Greek dualism, a Greek dualism that infected the early church, and it absolutely has nothing to do with the Hebrew thought or spirituality that Jesus would have known and experienced, and which characterized his early followers in the early days of the church. The degrading of the bodily, of the carnal and the material aspects of life, which, by the way, is also sometimes derived from a misconstrual of Paul's teaching. This has massively impacted Christian religious culture and generated agonizing guilt and shame in probably millions of people through the centuries, and even became imbued in aspects of Western culture more generally. And yet the Christian notions of incarnation and sacramentality stand in utter opposition to any kind of body-spirit dualism. Incarnation affirms that God comfortably inhabits a physical body with all its appetites and desires. And it makes no odds to me whether Jesus was straight or gay. But don't, for goodness sake, tell me that he didn't feel exactly the same spiritual urges or have the same inclination toward pleasure or food or drink or whatever that we all share as human beings, because then he wouldn't have been a human being. He would have been a fake human being. And in the same way, sacramentality, which is the whole practice and thought about the sacraments, this conveys too that the divine is mediated and experienced through the material and the physical. The whole earth, in fact, the entire universe, is one massive, great sacrament, a mediation of divinity. And it's in the microcosm of the Eucharist, the bread and wine of the Eucharist and the water of baptism and so on, that we experience this great Eucharist in a microcosmic way. And, the sacraments of the Church only make any sense to me against a background of the sacramentality of the entire physical universe. Now, I know Paul, in his letters, some of them, contrasts flesh and spirit, but believe me, that is quite a different theological point, which we will cover, believe me, on another occasion. And it's also important to remember that Paul was a thoroughgoing Jew with an essentially Hebrew worldview, a worldview which celebrates to this day and affirms the physical, never degrades it. So when Lent is used or practiced as a way of exalting the spiritual and degrading or shaming the physical, that is a misuse and a misunderstanding both of Lent and of Christian theology in general. So what then of fasting? What is the point behind fasting? Well, let me say what it isn't. The point isn't to buffet the body or degrade the body. Rather, it is to affirm that there are some things which are more important in our lives than food or comfort or bodily pleasure. As I say, there are good reasons to detox, to lay off things that harm us in excess, or which easily become things that control us. It's not a bad thing to take a break, to go easy, but that's not to do with guilt. It's nothing to do with these desires being in themselves bad. It's about looking after ourselves, looking after our bodies. The trouble with fasting of whatever kind is that we can very easily become overly focused on the giving up bit of it, instead of on the positive side, which is, the things that matter beyond the fasting. And so we miss the whole point, which is that Lent is a great opportunity to focus on what really matters to us, what is important, on what we might need to do to rebalance our lives, because they get out of skew at times. It's a chance to pause, to possibly reboot aspects of ourselves, to get back to the core principles that we really care about. So especially given our situation at the end of 2 years of enforced fasting from things that we otherwise enjoyed and took for granted, and the gloom of what's happening now, I'd like to just suggest some slightly different fasts, focused very particularly on taking better care of ourselves and feeding our inner self. I've put them in the form of a Lenten note to self, which I myself am going to follow. And it looks a little bit like this. So number 1, practice being more self-affirming. Give up being hard on yourself. So many people that I meet are far too hard on themselves. And I think we need to take a fast from that. In fact, give it up. Maybe it'd be a good idea through Lent to keep a journal in which, on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, we take the time to write down some things that are affirmations of ourselves, things that we like, that we believe in, that we are happy with about ourselves, instead of always focusing on that kind of inner critic. Number 2, practice pausing to breathe when anxious. We all know that that's a good idea, but doing it isn't always something that we get down to. So this is a time to actually specifically practice this. Give up worrying about stuff that we can't possibly do anything about. And breathing, taking time to consciously breathe, is probably the cheapest and most effective form of therapy that I know of. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Number 3, practice being present to nature. Give more time to getting out there among it. So, having more walks out in the fresh air is a great thing. But what I'm talking about here is a bit more than that. Practice being present. That is to be much more consciously connected to our surroundings. And, listen to what's going on. Listen to the birds singing. Notice them. Tune in to what's going on. That, again, is a hugely life-affirming, life-giving practice to engage in. Fourthly, practice speaking more hopefully to myself and to others. Give pessimism and pessimistic chat a bit of a break. Sometimes we can get into a groove of feeding ourselves pessimistic thoughts, talking pessimism to ourselves, and then spreading it to other people round about. Why don't we have a fast from that? Do a U-turn. Practice being hopeful, speaking hopefully to ourselves, and having hopeful conversations with other people. Fifthly, practice doing stuff that I've been putting off. Give up feeling bad about it and just get on. I confess, the world's greatest procrastinator. Mostly because, do you know what? There are, better things to do. There are happier things to do, more pleasant things to do. And so it's very easy to just, put them off. But what happens then is that we go around feeling bad about it all the time. And that's a very undermining thing. So just give up feeling bad about stuff and do something, whatever it is. A small start can make a big difference. And then sixthly, start each day with a serenity prayer, which, as you know, I love. Whether you use the original or the Holy Shed version, doesn't much matter, but it's a way of focusing our thoughts. I see the serenity prayer not so much as just something to pray, but as something to practice, to pursue as a spiritual practice in our lives. And on top of all of this, well, why not think of some things that you can do to enrich your life, to build up your core, to enrich your soul, like it could be all sorts of things. It's whatever works for you. But I think, when did you last go to an art gallery? I think art galleries are very, soulful places. Go to a gig of some kind, whatever kind of music it is that you like. Read some books, preferably accompanied by a lovely cup of coffee or whatever else. Indulge yourself with some music, Take time to just immerse yourself in some music that you haven't listened to for a long time. That's a soul feeding thing to do. Give yourself the time to sit on a park bench or on a hilltop or in some woods and just stare. Staring is a great thing to do. I don't mean S-T-I-R, I mean S-T-A-R-E. It's a nourishing thing to spend some time staring and breathe it all in. Or, hey, why not attend an online Enneagram course to find out more about yourself? Now, I think I know of one. Yes, it's on the 19th of March. And you might like to join me for that, because I think it's good to make an investment in ourselves, in understanding ourselves better. If you can afford it, join me on a gorgeous retreat at Holland House in Worcestershire, where we're thinking about living soulfully. Or at the amazing Amadown over Easter weekend, where I'm leading a retreat. Now, that would be a great way to spend Easter. But hey, you know what I'm saying. Feed your soul. That is a wonderful and appropriate Lenten thing to do. And finally, of course, join in the Holy Shed through Lent, where, among other things, I would like to reintroduce you to the Apostle Paul. I might call it How to Read Paul and Still Be a Christian. Or all we are saying is give Paul a chance, because I think that I might be able to introduce you to a Paul you haven't met. He's not exactly the hero of progressively minded Christians, but I think there's a whole nother way to look at Paul. So that's something that I hope we can concentrate on a little bit. And of course, we'll have a Good Friday event that I'd like you to contribute to, but I'll tell you more about that as we go along. So look, here is a prayer. God, who brings beauty from ashes, and I haven't given you the prayer there, have I? There it is. God, who brings beauty from ashes, who shines with pure joy from snowdrops on cold days, who dances through grey skies in rainbow colours, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet. In the dust of disappointment and despair, you scrawl visions of hope, saying that this is not the end. Even as we weep, this is not the end. This is a new beginning. Amen. So hey, it's time, I think, for a quick drink. I don't know if you've given up alcohol for Lent, or whether you've given it up altogether. That's fine. I haven't. So whatever drink it is that you've got, I invite you to pour it or grab it right now, and let's make a toast. A toast to existence, to being part of this great wheel of life. A toast to flowers on dull days, to smiling faces that penetrate despair and tell us life is worth living through every single tear. A toast to the suffering people of Ukraine. May they find comfort in their suffering, hope in their despair, and an end to the hell that they're experiencing right now. A toast to goodness, which is always greater than evil. Dear friends, to life, l'chaim. Okay, well, if you like what we're doing here in the Holy Shed, you can support us by buying us a coffee. Here on your screen is the link, and it's always at the top of the posts on the Holy Shed Facebook page. Thank you so much, you lovely people, for supporting us in this way and in lots of other ways too, with your words and with your presence with us through these difficult times that we've experienced. Next week, as I say, is our birthday, the birthday of the Holy Shed. There shall be cake and there shall be drink here, and I hope that you will avail yourself of some of that too. And I'll be talking a little bit more about some of the things that the future holds for the Holy Shed. So please remember to send in to me just a few lines of what the Holy Shed means to you that I want to put together for next week. Maybe a photo. Some of you have sent me some photos of you watching the Holy Shed. Laptop there, glass of wine, whatever. That would be great. If you could send me your version of that, I would really like that. And and there is this amazing t-shirt that I'm wearing here, which you can have one as well if you would like. And the company that produced this shirt, you can go to them, to their website, and you can just order a copy, and a small amount of money from that will come back to the Holy Shed, which has got to be good. So I'll put a link for that up on the Holy Shed Facebook page, and if you fancy that, that'd be great. I've talked about the things that are going on in the next sort of few weeks: the Enneagram workshop online, the Holland House retreat, and the retreat at Amadown. I hope that some of these are things that you can avail yourself of too. And also, I should just say that tomorrow I am doing Pause for Thought, but it may be a little bit early for many of you. It's not the 9:20 one that I usually do. I'm just doing a one-off on the Vanessa show at 5:45 a.m. Not good from my point of view, but it's a great opportunity, and if you can join me, that'd be lovely. But I'll put a link up for it as well at some later point. So, a blessing. The blessing of God, the eternal goodwill of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God be among us and between us now and always. Amen. Okay, so I think that's just about it, really. I'm going to finish with a song by Michael Franti. I love Michael Franti. He's a singer from San Francisco, and he's one of my Jesus characters. There are some people who I just want to follow because I think they're wonderful people, and Michael Franti is just such a person. And I'm going to play a song for you as we finish, which I don't know if I've ever used it before, but it seems very appropriate today because it's called, are you ready for this? This World Is So Fucked Up. And it's a very positive song, because it goes on to say this world is so fucked up, but we're never giving up. And it's his way of facing into the darkness and depression that we so often find in the world, and saying, we can do something about that. And it goes to a lovely little video which tells a story in itself that you might be able to discern. But I'll also post on Facebook a little movie about how he made what the actual movie means to him, and explaining it. So you might want to look at that. Anyway, dear friends, go well, stay human, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the world this Lent, and I'll see you soon. Enjoy this.
Let me tell you about the situation going on up inside my head today. My mind is running round in circles, trying to make sense of the people who are running everything today. All these politicians tweeting, got their message on repeat, and try dividing us with fear and hate. I wish I could find a better way to say this. This world is so fucked up, but I ain't never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. This world is so fucked up, but I ain't never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. Never giving up. I wish I could find a better way to say this. We ain't asking for money, we just wanna make change. We do it for all of the people who need it, cause they got a voice and a name. I can't believe how we living today. I got this anger and sadness and pain. They can build walls, but we can build bridges, and we can be part of the change. I wish I could find a better way to say this. I wish I could find a better way to say this. This world is so fucked up, but I ain't never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. This world is so fucked up, but I ain't never giving up on it. Never giving up on it. Never giving up. Let me tell you about the situation going on all around the world today. There's a billion different people doing a billion different things to make a billion places better today. And I know that we can make a better